Welcome to the show, Donnie Dotson. How are you, sir?
Never better. How are you doing today, Dustin?
I'm doing great. So it's so wonderful to have you on the show. And I found out about you and what you're doing. I thought it's such a unique, exciting thing that you're doing. So I can't wait to find out more about your journey and what you're currently doing. So could you please briefly introduce yourself and a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Donnie. I am the CEO and founder of Carry, and we are a platform for up and coming, very talented professional athletes who are trying to make the top tours in pro golf. But it's an expensive endeavor, and so how can we help them with the financial runway they need to train and compete the right way by sourcing that capital from individual investors as well as corporate sponsors?
Before you got to Carey,
Sure.
what was your career path and what were you interested in your formative years growing up?
Yeah. So my career started in the national security space. I was a Marine straight out of high school, partly because I was 17 going on 13 and needed a little bit of growing up.
Mm.
I also wasn't nearly as good of a high school football player as I thought. So I enlisted into the Marine Corps on a bit of a whim in 99. The world did look quite different back then. And aside from marrying my wife and my personal faith, it's definitely the best decision I've ever made in terms of enlisting in the Marine Corps. We would not be having this conversation now were it not for my 4 years in the Marines. I can tell you that the 2 years that I served on active duty, both pre 9/11 and post 9/11, were very different in terms of experience, in terms of deployments. My 4 years culminated with the initial invasion of Iraq, and we came home after what we thought, after the initial ground campaign, thinking the war was over. And I got out, went to school at the University of South Florida on the GI Bill, studied Arabic primarily before going back to work for the government for the Department of Defense. I was trained by CIA to handle intelligence sources and did that for about 7 or 8 years before ultimately leaving the government, going to business school at Duke, and coming out working in finance at Goldman Sachs. I was at Goldman for 3 years, and I really enjoyed my time there as well. It was a great opportunity to learn about the private sector firsthand. But I knew it was probably not going to be a forever type thing. I was very much still scratching the surface in terms of what was available in the private sector. And in late January of 2020, I had a chance to join a company called Sport Radar. Sport Radar was then private. It's since gone public, but the business itself transacts in sports data. They collect data from live events all around the world, and they distribute that data to media partners, sports betting operators. And it was during this time that I really got a crash course into the business of sports, in no small part thanks to the fact that COVID shut down live sports 6 weeks after I joined the company. And so through some luck and initiative along the way, I really did get a crash course in the business of sports, the underlying economics for how leagues make money, how teams make money, and certainly how individual athletes not only make money, but how they fuel their careers. You can think of individual athletes in many circumstances as startups in their own right. They're businesses, and they've got to have capital to train and compete. And it was while I was at Sport Radar that I came to discover the problem that we're solving with Carry. And I guess it's a long answer to a short question in terms of my path to getting to Carry, but I've done a little bit of everything. I've had the fortunate blessing to be able to travel the world and meet with a lot of wonderful people. And I think every experience that I've had along the way has kind of led me to exactly where we are today.
When you got into the sports business,
Yep.
what was it primarily that attracted you to it? Or what did you see that you were like, you know what, I'm going to transfer these skills into this arena?
I played, I think, every stick and ball sport growing up. I grew up in South Florida, so sports are pretty much year round, and I've always been a super fan. I like having people or a team to cheer for, and the ability to kind of work in the industry, right? I long thought that my dream job was what I was doing as a civil servant in government service. I really liked the role and responsibility I had in terms of finding and managing intelligence sources on behalf of the U.S. government. But once I was in that position, and once I got married and priorities shifted, I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do, forever. And if you would have said, "Hey, what's one thing that you really love?" I would have said either playing or certainly watching sports. And so the chance to find a job within the industry for a fast growing company and to be able to learn, during a very turbulent time within not only sports, but certainly, all sectors of society, was a great chance for me to pivot from finance and led me to where I am now.
In your experience, especially with the military, but then also with finance, maybe some of the DoD experience as well, has there been one thing over another or a few things that were most beneficial into what you're currently doing now for your role? And the reason I ask you this is similar to your statement about a dream job, right?
Yep.
And like what that looks like. A lot of people want to work in sports or they love sports, similar to what you expressed. Like, is there something that you were like, okay, if I were to tell my younger self, it would be to focus more on X, Y, and Z? Are there any of those things?
Um, the easy answer is to focus on relationships. That has definitely been the through point for everything I've had the chance to do. Even as a junior Marine team leader, right? The ability to effectively manage up and down and to build the kinds of relationships that do promote mutual trust and the desire to want to help each other. That's been kind of a core thread. Probably a bigger life lesson that I've learned along the way through my own journey. I used to kind of tell myself this fairy tale a bit about how I was a self-made person. My parents didn't have a lot of means growing up. Again, I used the GI Bill to put myself through college. And early in my professional career, I had someone tell me like, "Hey, I know a bit about your story. It sounds like you've kind of really," his exact quote was, "you really picked yourself up by the bootstraps and kind of made a way for yourself." And in the moment, this was someone senior who I really respected, and it was nice to be able to say, "Yeah, good job, Donnie. You did all these things." But as I've learned, 20 years later, and which really is the underlying reason for the name Carey, is that I don't care what your starting circumstances are. I don't care what adversity you've had to overcome. And I know there are incredible challenges out there that people have overcome. If you've had any kind of success in life at all, you've never done it alone. Somewhere along the way, people have invested in you, whether it was monetarily, mentorship, it could be a teacher, a pastor, a rabbi, it could be a spouse, parents, you name it. Somewhere along the way, someone, and probably more than someone, probably some people have invested in you and have played a role in your success, however indirect it may be. And so this idea that at different times in your life, people will help carry you towards success. And at the same time, at different times in your life, hopefully you will help carry others towards success has been something I've learned personally over the last 20 years, and may not be exactly a one-for-one experience from each stop on the journey, but it's something that has been, a lesson throughout the career.
Were there any people that stand out, and now that you're thinking about this, were that in your journey that you were like, okay, this was the person that was most impactful along these stops?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had, I can think of my youth pastor growing up in my church, high school football coach who played a central role in my early development. Countless leaders within the Marine Corps that set an example for what right looks like, and different bosses along the way, friends, and probably most important, my wife. Since we've been married now 12 years, she's often been the one, who sees behind the curtain when things aren't going great, and when things are going very well, she's the one, waving the flag and kind of championing me and what we're doing here with Carey to keep pushing forward.
That's amazing. That's great. So I want to talk. Let's dive into Carrie itself. So let's walk through the genesis of how this came to be. And I know a decent amount about it, but I'd love to hear you go into depth of like how this all came to be and what is your vision for the company.
Yeah, it's one of these things that was probably even before I was really aware of it, probably percolating in the background um, at different times for me. I remember we talked about Goldman. I remember when I was at Goldman Sachs at the time, it was 2017, 2018. A player for the Brooklyn Nets, Spencer Dinwiddie, was talking about how he would love to be able to essentially um, sell shares in a future contract through a bond like instrument where you could essentially invest in his career. And there have been a lot of platforms and things that have popped up since then, but it was kind of cutting edge at the time, and it didn't really play well with the NBA, certainly pre-COVID. But I remember talking with some buddies at our desk at Goldman and just kind of brainstorming about how cool it would be to be able to invest in athletes, right? Talking with fellow sports nerds, and so that was interesting. It was kind of in the background, but certainly I had never thought about it beyond that. And then I found myself working for Sport Radar 6 weeks after I joined the company. Live sports went away because of COVID, and within golf, a sport that I love. I grew up in Florida. Golf is everywhere in Florida, but I've never been better than an average, weekend handicapper at best. A sport that I love. It was tough when there was no golf to watch on the weekends, and no tournaments to follow. One of the first events to come back, during the kind of height of COVID, was not a PGA Tour event. In fact, it was this mini tour event called the Scottsdale Open, or also known as the Desert Financial Open. And this only rose to my awareness, or only became aware of it because when I was at Sport Radar, people were actually betting on this tournament. And I had some people reach out to me saying, "Hey, Donnie, we know you're a bit of a self-professed golf nerd. What is this Desert Financial Open, and why are people betting on it?" I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. Never heard of this tournament. But I go to the Rinky Dink website. I didn't know what a mini tour was, going back 4 years ago. And I go to this Rinky Dink website, and sure enough, there's 100 some odd players in the field, including a few names I recognize from the PGA Tour. And I said, well, it's a 54-hole event. I don't know who 95% of these pros are, or these players are, but I do know who Joel Damon is, who Kevin Streelman is. My lazy analysis was these guys are going to run away with the event. At the time, I thought there was a huge delta between those players on the PGA Tour and those who are not. And I say that now, it's almost painful to say because that's my job. But fast forward, the spoiler alert was that Joel and Kevin played well, but they didn't win the tournament. The guy who did, and players who finished ahead of them on the leaderboard, I just started researching their personal backgrounds and bios. And don't get me wrong, you had plenty of players in the field that were superstars in the waiting. They had gone to the blue chip golf powerhouse colleges, and some of them have since gone on to success in the PGA Tour. But you had a lot of players in the field that had never had any real status on a major tour, and maybe didn't even play in college. And I just became fascinated with this reality that wait, there are athletes out there, golfers out there that, if given an opportunity over a 2, 3, 4 day event, can not only hang with PGA Tour players but beat them. And that was a discovery for me at the time. So I started kind of researching this ecosystem of call it developmental tour or minor league professional golf. I started researching this ecosystem and just became fascinated by the stories of the players. The struggle, the grind that they go through to make it, the sacrifice up front in terms of costs, and then also reading about this world of sponsoring or investing in athletes and the many flavors and variations of that out there. That was a very much a new discovery for me. And once I became aware of this world, once I became aware of the talent pool that's out there, the some of the deal terms that these athletes were agreeing to in order to extend their runway to stay in the game, I just became obsessed to the point where, as much as I love sports, I never played fantasy sports. I just became obsessed where I was literally walking around with my cell phone, following all these different mini tours, developmental tours. And I was, I had probably talked early on to maybe 25, 30 golfers in the space, but I was following them religiously to the point where my wife was like, what are you doing on your phone all the time? I'm like, hey, this guy Brady just shot a 64 and, in some tournament in Arizona. And so, I think it was the exposure to this mini tour event and the ecosystem of talent out there. And once I realized there is a lot of talent out there and that many of them have a financial need to really go about it the right way, I said, this is what I'm supposed to do. There's something here. There's a business here. And I spent some time kind of flushing it out in the background. And once I felt like I knew enough, I decided just to go all in back in April of 21.
What's the biggest challenge you see for this talent? Like what is the gap there of how much they need to be successful?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the tour. It depends on, mode of travel. There's all the different tours, especially in the developmental level, have, a bit of a unique culture in terms of, on the women's side, you'll see a much stronger culture of host housing. So that will reduce travel costs. On the men's side, it may not be the same. At the same time, on the men's side, you'll often find the tournaments are more geographically connected, right, in a more linear path. So you can go from Florida to Georgia to South Carolina to North Carolina, where on the women's side, you see them oftentimes, seemingly circumnavigating the globe to make tournaments. So even if there are, reduced housing or lodging costs because of host housing, the travel is still significant. So it depends on the tour, depends on number of events, depends on how they're getting around, whether they're driving or flying. But you can estimate for these developmental tours anywhere between 30 to 100K is probably table stakes to compete. And that's entry fees, that's caddies, that's, again, to and from events. Nowadays, it sounds crazy, but things like a launch monitor, right? A TrackMan, a flight scope, whatever, Foresight, whatever your preferred vendor is, those things have just about become table stakes. You see them at every PGA Tour event, you see them at every LPGA Tour event, and they've certainly, filtered down to the lower tours. And if you're a top level player looking to get your LPGA Tour card or your PGA Tour card, you kind of got to have maybe not all the bells and whistles out there, but you need to have most of them if you're going to go about it the right way.
So for what you're doing with Carrie, walk me through how the platform actually works. Like, is this, well, I don't want to limit you to your answer, but walk me through like how it works, like how you find the talent, how do you connect the dots to fundraise for them or invest in them? How does that work?
Yeah, I will say our platform, our model is evolving a little bit. First, I'll talk about talent, right? There is so much talent out there. Right now, we focus primarily on players who are out of college, whether they just left college or maybe they've been pro for a year or two and they realize, hey, I was a stud. I did a lot of winning as an amateur, did a lot of winning in my collegiate career, but it's really tough out here and it's really expensive. And maybe any funds I had from mom or dad or maybe even my local club has kind of since come and gone, and I need some additional funding to stay in it. Originally, our model was about sourcing that capital primarily from individual investors, right? How could individuals invest in the careers of golfers in exchange for some unique access, the ability to look behind the curtain, to kind of live vicariously through these players, events, and then some upside in a small upside in their potential earnings, if they make it to the top tours. But we've started to pivot our model where we are going to source the majority of capital from corporate sponsors. And in some ways, you can kind of think of it similar to an NIL collective, where you have this aggregate of college athletes that maybe independently would struggle to get would struggle to get funding, but marketing them as a group or as a collective enables all individuals, all athletes, to access the funding they need. And so we're going to start pitching our athletes to corporate sponsors and ideally funding their annual runway from a few title sponsors.
So would you say in your model and what you're doing, do you compete with agents or do you work with agents? Like, how does that space work?
Yeah, that's something that's probably evolving as well. Early on, agents were a great source of deal flow for us, or talent, as our coaches, parents, the athletes themselves, and in our own scouting and recruiting processes. But what we found is, in many cases, and understandably so, given the industry, but in many cases, players who have an agent early in their career, often have an agent in kind of name and contract alone.
Mm-hmm.
The manager, the player rep may help them early on, get a starter deal from an OEM or a leading golf brand like a Titleist. But after that, it's kind of, hey, I'll stay in touch. I'll keep the relationship warm. And then once you break through to the PGA Tour, the LPGA Tour, and there's a lot more inbound deal flow, then I'll be there to kind of help you through the peak of your career. And I don't fault agents at all for that. I understand, how they're incentivized. And if you've got a roster full of players who are on the bigger tours, you're going to want to focus on them because that's where the opportunities are. Our approach is to let's focus on them early. And I think with our new model where we're pitching corporate sponsors primarily, at times we will compete with agents, but at times, hopefully we can be complementary to an existing team or potential partnerships. So I want to take an open mind on that. I think there's a chance that it may be a little bit of column A and column B.
Gotcha. As far as the actual players and their game development, how active is Carey and your team with piecing together like the things that they need to develop their actual game?
Yeah, I mean, so far by this point, that the players that we have partnered with, I mean, they're already professional. They're already on the track to getting to the top tours if they have enough time and opportunities to compete. What we've tried to do is provide some a la carte resources that could be mental performance coaching, that could be data tracking or shot tracking platforms that may give them some additional insight into strengths and weaknesses of their games. But in terms of, hey, we think you need to do this from a scheduling standpoint, from a swing standpoint, from an on-course strategy standpoint, that's definitely not our role.
Mm-hmm.
I would, as we go forward, I would like to be able to continue to add some of those a la carte services. And for players who want more, hey, it's available to you, but by no means are we directing the path that you need to take to make it. There are a million different swings out there. There are many different kind of mental mindset approaches to being successful. If they've gotten this far, and most of them have had, extremely successful careers as amateurs and early stage pros, it's not for us to interfere. We just want to make sure they continue to get reps so they can go on to have the career that they would that they're destined for.
To tie this into your career trajectory, and now that you're saying you're leading this organization and providing that, do you draw a direct line to your approach here? Because it sounds like you're looking at things holistically, but not necessarily telling people what to do, right? Like we'll find the resources for you. They will be available, but it seems like a very maybe progressive, but it's very thoughtful and it's very. Do you draw a line between the way you have been mentored and led and learned growing up towards what you're doing now?
I mean, probably no more than kind of what I alluded to earlier, where if you give people an opportunity, if you invest in them and not just monetarily, but if you invest in their success in many different ways, that you'd be surprised the kind of success people can have. I would say that's probably the only through. But for me, starting this venture, I do see some parallels to pro golf. And what I love about it is I love people that are brave enough to bet on themselves and to chase a dream. And when you're just starting out as a professional golfer, I don't care how accomplished you were as a college player, it's really tough. There's so much talent out there. The purses they're playing, the tournaments they're playing in have very small purses. I imagine coming out of college, most of them have college degrees at 22, 23. It can be very tempting to look over the fence, so to speak, and see your buddies from college now, entry level jobs, making consistent salary, consistent wage, maybe, putting away some money in their 401k or whatever it might be. I can imagine the safety of that can be quite alluring. And so for me, I have tremendous respect for anyone who is willing to do something hard and bet on themselves. And maybe in that light,
Mhm.
anyone who's ever created a business or started something from scratch can kind of appreciate what it's like to be an athlete in an individual sport where there is no draft, where there is no guaranteed compensation. So that would be another parallel maybe to attach.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think? I'm thinking about other sports and where
Yep.
this rate, but golf seems such a unique niche to do this, and I don't see anywhere else that this could really be. I mean, maybe tennis. Um,
Yeah. I actually think there are quite a few sports. I mean, tennis is a good example. The world of, I should have said in the beginning, the world of sponsoring players, athletes, golfers, tennis players, race car drivers, it's been around for a long time. Uh, it tends to be very privatized, and the deals that are out there tend to vary wildly, right? You get most of them are structured as either some kind of loan or something that looks more like a gift. Hey, Dustin, you play at our club. We believe in you. Here's some money to get your career started. If you make it big someday, remember the club. And then there are other scenarios where, hey, Dustin, we think you're a great golfer. Here's $100,000. We'll take 50% of your earnings for the next 10 years or greater. Um, we can't be in the business of giving away free money, but we're certainly not going to be that latter scenario. And I would say that this kind of application, this kind of sponsoring of athletes, definitely golf, definitely tennis. You see it a little bit within baseball, even though it's a team sport. The minor leagues, minor leagues are notorious for not paying their players a ton. So baseball, MMA, racing. I had one of our investors reach out probably 6 months ago and say, hey, I know someone, she's a professional squash player, but could use some funding to kind of get her career on the right path. Is this something you could probably help educate us on, in terms of contract? And so I think there are a lot of individual sports out there where it applies. For right now, we want to be laser focused on golf. That's where we have our expertise. It's what we know best. And while we have 18 athletes on our platform so far, we have aspirations of having many, many more before we move on to other sports.
Yeah, I think that's so important to be so laser focused, and if you duplicate it or do things later, that's fine. But you perfect that recipe with that dish, and then you go out to the other dishes in the restaurant. So I'll ask you this, because you said you have 18 players. Is there anything that you've seen so far, whether it be players or people that you want to highlight or that jump out to you, like this person is different, or this is the next thing that I'm seeing come down the pike?
I get asked all the time, like, what do you look for most in players? And obviously, when you're analyzing talent kind of in the early stage of their pro career, you're not working with the same abundance of data as someone who's been on the PGA Tour for a few years, where you have a ton of data made available through ShotLink. So early on, while there is an element of quantitative analysis, a lot of it tends to be qualitative. What I look for most in people, and this isn't just athletes that come on our platform, but in terms of new hires, in terms of probably people that I associate with, I just love people that love to compete, no matter what it is. Like, really, really love to compete. Not kind of quasi, hey, I'm enjoying the ride when I'm winning, but we've got players on our platform right now that don't have status on a major tour. don't have status on developmental tour, but I get text messages from them, hey, I just played in this 8-man event, if the IRS is paying attention, I apologize, but some kind of cash game, right? And these guys like seek it out, right? And these 1-day events on these obscure tours, and they're doing it not because there's a lot of money to be made. They just want to get those tournament reps, even if it's a 1-day kind of loosely organized event. And so I love people who love to compete. We have some other criteria that we look for in terms of athlete selection, but finding someone that really, really wants to go out, and whether it's golf or anything else, like they want to win at all costs and they expect to win. I think that's it's a tough thing to identify, but when you can, it usually jumps off the page or jumps off the screen in this scenario. I'm very blessed to say that a number of our golfers have had tremendous success, especially within the last year. 2 ladies earning their LPGA Tour card. One of our players was the PGA Tour Latino America Player of the Year with multiple wins in South America last year. Another Monday qualified into a PGA Tour event and finished top 15 and earned some life-changing money for he and his wife. Another player who's earned himself multiple PGA Tour starts this year, and the list goes on and on. And I like to think those athletes and strongly believe those athletes probably would have had the same success without the role of carry. But it's nice to know that if we gave them a little more freedom to play aggressively or a little more peace of mind, that they didn't have to, walk away with the trophy every week to stay in the game. If we had some small hand in that, that's really cool.
So being in that position of being able to help and support and create a business, and it's mutually beneficial for you, for them, for their communities, for their families, for the sport, for everyone. I just think it's a very special place, very special seat to sit. And I think you're just going to be wildly successful. Everything that I've heard so far about what you're doing, and more importantly, probably the way you're doing it, is it's just fantastic. So I commend you, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are appreciative of the work that you're doing, and will continue to.
I think so. We've had a lot of inbound emails from investors, from parents of players, from coaches saying, "Hey, love what you are all doing. Love the approach you're taking." There are a lot of people that wish we were doing a lot more and a lot faster, and I get that, and hopefully we will get there. But I think if our North Star is helping athletes, helping people chase their dreams and be able to go about it the right way, and we do it the right way, eventually it's going to pay off, not only for the athletes, but certainly for us, and like you said, mutually beneficial business. And it's a mission I'm very proud of. It's a mission that is, again, near and dear to my heart from my own background. And it's whether carry goes on to become a highly profitable business or ultimately is just one step in my own journey, I wouldn't do anything over, and I certainly wouldn't change the path. I've learned so much in the last few years. I've been fortunate to meet good people like yourself and really grow a network, not only across sports, but across kind of across the broader private business, right? Across the startup landscape for sure. And those kinds of things. Do they pay the mortgage? No, but I would say often they're a little more invaluable.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for your time to be able to show. Any parting thoughts that you want to share or tell the audience where they can reach you, how they can get in contact?
Yeah. Our website is carry, CARRY.golf. Do not hesitate to reach out. We've got a contact us, tab on the website. My email is donnie@carry.golf. And I would say just, continue to look out. We're going to be signing some new players here soon and really growing our platform. And I'm excited for what 2024 has in store, for our business, but certainly for all stakeholders, investors, advisors, supporters like yourself, and probably most importantly, the athletes.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Donnie Dotson with Carry. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Dustin. Really appreciate it.